Let me begin by introducing myself. My name is Gabriel Dusil. I'm the Chief Marketing and Corporate Strategy Officer at Visual Unity Global. What we wanted to talk to you about today on this web seminar is return on investment specifically for video streaming. We've split the presentation in half, and in the first part we want to define some of the terms that we're talking about, what we mean by return on investment, to help you in defining your own business strategies in OTT, over-the-top content, and OVP, online video platform. What I'd like to really talk about are two things for this part of the presentation. One is the ROI of video streaming, new revenue streams, and how we can save costs as well from a return on investment, but also look at some features and benefits of OTT platforms. But before we even get into return on investment, we also need to look at total cost of ownership, because the two of them are tied very closely together. And the way we look at total cost of ownership is really about people, process, and technology. And we'll get into how we define that as well. One of the things that we want to look at is really understanding return on investment from the perspective of the entertainment industry versus the enterprise industry. Originally, we looked at video as consumers from an entertainment perspective, but video is really becoming quite a prominent role in video marketing for the enterprise. So when we look at it from the entertainment industry, we define entertainment video streaming as OTT, over-the-top content, and we define video streaming in the context of enterprise as online video platforms. So in the entertainment space, we basically use our library of content, whether it's TV shows or live content or movies or other types of user-generated content, in order to attract new subscribers and generate revenue through three typical monetization models. There's the transaction-oriented video on demand, there's the subscription-based model where we're paying monthly, for example, and then there's the advertising-based video on demand, delivering it for free, for example, from a subscriber perspective, but we're generating revenue through advertising. We're creating an environment of enhanced features and a very robust user experience in order to keep those subscribers subscribing on a monthly basis. In the enterprise space, it's very different. We're not necessarily selling the videos themselves, but we're using the videos in order to sell our product. So maybe the videos are demos, advertisements, client testimonials, or employees that are generating their own content. It could be, let's say, some confidential information like training conferences or some CEO announcements that are only delivered to an employee base. And all of these types of videos need a platform to deliver to their audience. Maybe that audience is a controlled audience, subscribers within that organization, or they may be end users themselves. But basically the video is used to sell the products that they have. And so the ROI that we generate and that we define from the entertainment industry is very different from that of the enterprise industry. And what we want to focus on in this presentation is specifically for the entertainment industry. The other way that we want to look at return on investment is the difference between looking at return on investment from generating money or generating new revenue streams versus saving money and being more efficient. In terms of getting our return on investment from an OTT platform in the entertainment space, for example, we're looking at increased profits, increased in revenue streams, and that will allow us to launch new services and maybe allocate some of that profit to launch new features as well. But when we're looking at ROI from a time perspective, it's looking at the streamlining of workflow within that organization, and a lot of that is in the realm of an OTT platform in terms of streamlining workflow from the digital delivery of video. But it's also related to efficient supply chain, and now we're looking at the delivery of video from suppliers on one side of us to the clients on the other side of us, and anybody in between that plays a role in a supply chain. When we're talking about ROI of money, we're focusing our revenue opportunities that advance the corporate strategy, and when we're looking at return on investment from a time perspective, it's focusing on new opportunities that improve efficiencies and therefore give us competitive advantages as well. Next is one of the areas that we really want to understand is how we look at OTT from building the platform ourselves versus using a cloud-based service. So in both cases, we have to purchase, we have to integrate, and we have to operate. But in building it ourselves in an in-house platform, it's really about waiting for that hardware or software that comes in the post, opening the package, and then installing that in our premise. In a cloud-based service, the client doesn't necessarily receive a physical box. They're agreeing to a service level agreement, and therefore utilizing the expertise in the cloud in terms of staffing, expertise, technical expertise, and operation efficiency. This is one of the intangible aspects of cloud-based services that has lingered over the last 15 years of cloud-based services. We used to call it outsourcing, and now we call it cloud-based services, where the intangible is that we're signing a service level agreement rather than receiving a physical box in the post. When we look at this from an end-to-end OTT service perspective, what we really want to communicate in this slide is the different pillars involved in this workflow. And we define this workflow in terms of 5 major pillars. There is the creation of content, then we have to contribute that content in terms of ingest or transcode, and we may be ingesting, for example, live feeds, which are transcoding on the fly, or we're ingesting video on demand or archived content into the platform that needs to be transcoded into different formats. Then there's the management pillar, and here we have several different modules. There's the dashboard, which gives us the window of the operations of the entire infrastructure and allows us to help improve the average revenue per user by looking at the different dynamics of how data is being used, how subscribers are using that data, and how effective marketing and sales are. We also have client relationship management, CRM. We have the CMS, or the content management platform, or in the context of video, we call it the media asset management. Then we also need to monetize that through a payment service, and that payment service may be connected to, for example, an advertisement gateway or a payment gateway to allow different flexible payment methods for our subscribers. We also have to have a separate module in terms of protecting that content, and this is the module where digital rights management sits and encryption. And finally, at a high level here, we're talking about a recommendation engine as well, a specific feature that generates and enhances revenue streams so they can learn about content that they typically wouldn't be able to discover themselves. That module itself, we see that as a revenue generator, not just a nice-to-have feature. The fourth pillar is delivery, and this is where CDN sits in terms of a global delivery of content, for example. And then there's the consumption of content as the fifth pillar, and this is where multi-screen sits, the television, the PC, the mobile, and the tablet. But we also look at multi-screen from the standpoint of other types of devices that would feed the content, such as a set-top box, a Blu-ray player that supports internet connectivity, or a gaming console, for example. No matter where we're looking at in terms of this workflow from creation, contribution, all the way to consumption, there are aspects of people, process, and technology that all play a role in the total cost of ownership of this infrastructure, whether you're building it yourself or whether you are buying a service level agreement and operating that service in the cloud. And understanding these different components of people, process, and technology, and defining how much of these components are costing, are part of a valuable process of understanding return on investment. Some of the considerations that are slightly out of scope of that previous slide are some of the hidden costs. And I like to start in terms of looking at the hidden cost from the aspect of trust. So subscribers are trusting you as a provider of video content, whether it's a subscriber that's uploading content to that platform, and they trust that you will secure that content and not lose it, for example, and how that plays a role in terms of the robustness of the platform. Then there's disaster recovery, and in terms of disaster recovery, we're looking at how quickly the content can be restored, or in downtime, how fast we can recover in order to maintain the continuity of the service. Another aspect is security. When we're talking about entertainment of video, we look at security from the standpoint of digital rights management. But security is not only about how secure that content is at the subscriber, but how the content is secure while it's in motion to that subscriber, and how secure it is in terms of the data center where it's resting, to making sure that it's not being stolen or not being compromised right at the central source where it's being archived. And finally, another hidden cost that we sometimes overlook is the legal liabilities. How legally liable are you to lost or stolen content, especially if that content is under some content rights that you've purchased from another provider that has licensed you those videos to play on your platform, and suddenly it gets compromised. Cloud-based services has evolved significantly over the last 15 years, whether it's client relationship management, storage, gaming, music, messaging service, productivity. All of these logos are quite familiar in terms of the top players in any of these areas. We have now been quite versed in the use of cloud-based services, but what I want to do is really take this slide to the next level and look at it from the perspective of video entertainment. We can see Adobe and Avid already offering video editing in the cloud. We have OTT services such as Netflix and Hulu that have come out of the US. We have metadata databases for video, IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, social video networking. We have video delivery networks like Akamai, Level 3, and Limelight, hosting services from Amazon and Microsoft, and of course video conferencing from Skype. So video, as one of the biggest hogs of bandwidth and really stressing a lot of networks today, we now have, thankfully, an internet that can serve video, and that has resulted in a lot of these video-based cloud services ready for prime time. And we just see OTT as just part of that mix in terms of servicing video in the cloud. Even when I say that, there's still going to be fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I've been selling cloud-based services for 15 years, and 15 years ago, we used to call cloud-based services outsourcing. We eventually migrated to software as a service and just generalizing that term to cloud-based services. But there are still some cultural issues within specific companies that have issue with a cloud-based service, and I want to look a little bit into detail of what some of those issues are. And one of them is reliability. So depending on where the company resides in the world, there are internet bottlenecks. And even if there's no internet bottleneck, let's say downstream, there are some services that have weak upstream. And that needs to play a role in terms of making sure the upload is robust enough to be able to serve video content. Also, single point of failure is often discussed as an issue. If they go down, then the entire service goes down. The redundancy of internet providers is typically a consideration when a single point of failure is a concern. Another one is more kind of a psychological concern, and this is one over control. And some companies still feel this need to have ownership of the infrastructure, or have that infrastructure under their feet. And if it's in their premise, then they feel that they own that content and own that infrastructure. If it's in the cloud, then they have this feeling that is disconnected from them, and therefore they're disconnected from that control. Another one is looking at the issue of accounting, and some companies have a strategy of capital cost investments, and some companies have a strategy of operating cost. From a capital cost, those that prefer capital cost will look at a build as a preferred business model. Those that are looking at a operating cost, maybe for tax reasons, then a cloud-based service is an ideal business model for them. Now, the last one I want to talk about here, and it's quite a sensitive one, but I want to lay it on the table as part of the discussion, and that's one of ego. And that is individuals that have a decision-making role or an influential role in purchasing an infrastructure, but their personal goal is in gathering and amassing a powerful empire within their department. And whether that empire is in the infrastructure that they're controlling or whether it's in staff, both of that results in more power within the organization, more decision making, leverage, and it builds a personal empire. And sometimes we see a cloud-based service as a direct threat to those type of managers that really want to build that empire, because they view a cloud-based service really taking away from that power that they're trying to amass within their department. And a good article that really talks about that, it's quite a recent one in fact, is from entrepreneur.com. It's called "Is Your Managerial Ego Too Big?" And you can read about it on this web link that I've included on this slide.